I could hear a keyboard, but I can't hear it now, so that's good. We're live now, lads, so we'll give it a minute to let a few people trickle in, and as soon as our amazing coordinator Charlotte gives us a thumbs up, we'll make a start. How are you guys doing today?
Okay, thank you. Busy, usual, cold.
It's really cold today in London. I also accidentally left my window open, you know, in the morning, and I just realised, and I'm really cold. But I'm wrapped in 2 blankets, so hopefully that will solve the problem.
Proper pea super in Walthamstow.
I'm
how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, a little bit. I've had way too many coffees, so I'm going to come across as very enthusiastic about the Labour Party. So I hope you're ready. And right, we've got some people tuning in now, so I think we're good to make a start. So welcome to everyone watching, and thank you for joining us. My name is Amar. I'm an editor at Red Pepper magazine, a trade unionist, journalist, bartender, and reluctant Labour member. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Sonali, Bhattacharyya, and Deborah Hermanns today. Earlier this year, the Forward Momentum slate swept the Momentum NCG election on a manifesto of democratisation, community organising, and intersectional solidarity. It was heralded by some on the left as evidence of a potential resurgence of the Labour left after the election defeat of December 2019. The months since have seen Momentum embroiled in controversies over the NEC slate nominations, Corbyn suspension, the new party leadership, and strategy. So here to set the record straight on everything, we have Sonali and Deborah, who are relatively recently elected members of Momentum's national coordinating group. They ran as part of the Forward Momentum ticket. Welcome to Red Pepper. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
It's been a hectic few months for you, I'm sure, and we're going to try and cover a lot of ground, but let's just start with some introductions. So, Deborah, do you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So thanks so much for inviting us. It's exciting to speak to you, and big fan of Red Pepper, obviously. So my name's Deborah. I am originally from Berlin. I've been here now almost 10 years, which is quite wild. And I used to live in Birmingham, but I live in London now, South London, obviously. And in my day job, I work for actually German Political Foundation. And before that, I sort of helped found and build The World Transformed and spend a lot of my energy on that. And now, you know, sit on the Momentum NCG.
Great.
That's good. I didn't know you were looking for them. I'm going to talk more about that at a future point. My name is Sonali. I am a playwright and I'm an activist. I was elected to the NCG along with Deborah in July. I'm National Secretary for Momentum, and I'm also a London regional rep. I first became involved I was politicised through the Blair years, I guess you'd say. So I initially got involved, really, I spent my time protesting against the Labour Party on a variety of issues, from deaths in custody to miscarriages of justice to international issues around the occupation of Palestine and around Iraq and Afghanistan, of course. I never thought that I'd be a Labour Party activist, but I joined actually after Ed Miliband lost in 2015 out of a sense of desperation, and then very quickly became extremely active and then quite rapidly an organiser when Corbyn was put onto the ticket and then became leader.
From desperation to action, I think that's a classic leftist trajectory. Firstly, for anyone who has happened across this somehow, not through the normal channels, can someone summarize what Momentum is in like 1 or 2 sentences?
Momentum was initially established to promote and defend Corbyn's leadership, but I'd say that has now become the biggest mass membership in Britain for the socialist left. We're not affiliated to the Labour Party, but we have quite a close relationship with the Labour Party, and I guess we exist to maintain and extend the manifesto commitments that were fostered under Corbyn. That's more than 2 or 3 sentences. Sorry.
I think that's pretty good. That's pretty on it. So how did the both of you end up involved in Momentum?
Yeah, sorry, and also my internet just messed up a bit. South London has really bad internet, so if I'm ever gone, I will come back. So yeah, I've sort of been a bit involved in Momentum, I guess, since it started, and was just on the fringes of it. Like, had a lot of friends who were quite involved, but really like spent all of my time on the What Transformed, and we were always very clear on, you know, showing that we had our own identity as well, even though we came out of Momentum. And I guess for a few years, really, I'd sort of seen, you know, been watching from the outside, seen some of the problems of like, yeah, I guess like a lack of really valuing the grassroots and trying to building Momentum into a sort of vibrant membership organisation, and just lots of problems that I'm sure, you know, a lot of people agree with. But I think, and I'd also been put off a little bit by, I guess, some of the political culture, and I just didn't really want to get involved. But then after the general election, after that loss, I think, you know, I was speaking to a few comrades, and it was just very, very clear to me that Momentum in this moment in time was like so crucial, and that for its survival, it needed a revival, and that I just really thought it needed a new direction and it needed a new leadership, but that had to happen from the grassroots, from the bottom up. And that's when sort of with, yeah, like literally a few comrades sort of started having conversations, literally traveled to like quite a few cities across the country, just meeting activists, and then, you know, very, very slowly, I guess, started to build, you know, what would become Forward Momentum. And, you know, I'm really, really proud of what we did, just because I think we really, really use that process of the campaign not to just get elected, but to genuinely like build a vision of what Momentum could be. And I think we actually managed to build a lot of consensus. I think, you know, you could see it when you know, our, I guess, opponents started their campaign, like there was a lot of agreement really that Momentum needed a real change in direction, that it needed to become more democratic, more sort of campaigning orientated, and yeah, and then to be honest, it wasn't my dream to you know, to get elected to the national coordinating group, but I think I was just so invested, and I thought it was really, really important to actually see these changes through. And that's when I decided to sort of put myself forward in our primaries, and to then ultimately, you know, get elected. And I was really, really happy that we managed to win 20 out of 20 regional seats. And I think that has given us a real, you know, unity on the national coordinating group, and a real, yeah, chance to make a change over these 2 years that we're in office.
Brilliant. We're going to be talking a bit more about what that involves a little bit later on. Sonali, how did you first get involved in Momentum? How did you get involved in Forward Momentum as well?
So I've been a Momentum activist since it was first founded. I'm in an extremely right-wing CLP in Walthamstow. Momentum has been crucial for the left to organise locally. It's the Labour Party is impenetrable where I am, essentially. So especially Corbyn third, and people really wanting to get involved, Momentum's been really crucial. So I've been on the steering group of like Waltham Forest Momentum for some years now, and we've you know, sort of, I really have seen firsthand a lot of the things that Debs is talking about, the sort of frustration with the leadership, the previous leadership of Momentum, as well as also, you know, like a real gratitude, to be fair, as well, that Momentum existed, and that there was an independent left organising space, and the, you know, sort of like but also seeing sort of like the gaps in that, what needed to be, what could be improved. And so I was contacted initially by a friend that me and Debs have in common, TWT friend, who was like, there's someone called Debs that wants to talk to you because she wants to talk to key activists all around the country, and had like this sort of like very sort of like forthright conversation about what needed to change about Momentum. It was like the first thing we ever sort of like spoke about. And I actually just initially got involved as an organizer. I tend to see myself as a grassroots organizer. It didn't occur to me to stand for a national position. It's not something I would ever really consider doing. But I was so invested in the campaign, and the sort of the ethos of the campaign and the hopes for the campaign aligned so closely with how I saw the potential for Momentum going forward, that I got involved and was persuaded to stand. And it's all a little bit like it was all quite unexpected, really. But I'm not someone who ordinarily would be seeking a national position for something. So it is. But I feel really lucky to have been elected with a really tremendous bunch of activists who have this sort of shared collective vision that Debs was talking about.
Yeah, well, some have greatness thrust upon them, I suppose. One critique, I suppose, or one conversation that came up during the NCG election process was the question of open primaries. Forward Momentum ran open primaries for its candidates, and why was that important? Because there's also an argument to an extent, isn't there, that open primaries are all well and good, but running them for the internal election of a slate, running for the NCG of an organisation on the left of the Labour Party might kind of just be, levels within levels and creating more processes. Why was it important to you guys to run open primaries?
I mean, I can quickly come in on that. If it wasn't for open primaries, someone like me certainly would never have considered standing, and I certainly never would have been elected to the NCG, I think, without an open primary system. And I think that's the case for a lot of the NCG. Most of us are well known where we are. We're well known as local organisers, because a lot of us are sort of like, almost, I think probably all of us, but like the vast majority of grassroots local organisers. Maybe we just need to have more people who are unassuming local grassroots organisers elected to these positions. I mean, it's worth a go, right? But that wouldn't happen without open primaries. We wouldn't have the profile needed. I think Deb's internet might have just frozen.
I think so. Well, she'll be back, we hope. Are there any reflections on the campaign? Because Forward Momentum won by a milestone, just completely swept the NCG. But the campaign between Forward Momentum and Momentum Renewal, which was a kind of competing slate, got particularly divisive online in particular. Why do you think that was, and is there anything that you can identify that we can learn from going forwards?
It did, and it's a shame that it did. I think that there maybe is sometimes a tendency on the left for people to get very entrenched within whatever sort of grouping that they feel that they're part of, when really we should always be sort of seeking solidarity and unity. And I think it was a bit of a distraction, and it was quite stressful at times, unnecessarily so. But I think what was really heartening that came out of that election, however stressful the points of it were, was actually there was enormous overlap between what both slates were saying. And at a point for the British left where we just lost, an election that all of us sort of felt absolutely devastated by, because we could see the impending disaster of this Tory government, which is now unfolding. We knew the impact that would have upon people's lives. That despite that sense of like that lack of morale, actually there was a really shared and unified idea and vision for how the left should proceed going forward. And that shows actually enormous resilience in the left, and that's something we should hold on to and not really be fighting about the nuances necessarily. I think that's something to be celebrated. That was one of the really great things about the campaign. In every hustings, in all meetings we did, just speaking to local activists, there was so much of a shared vision. And it's a lot of what we were talking about sort of like needing to like build the movement that we always were promised, about how that it had to involve connecting up community organisers with workplace organisers, with grassroots campaigning, and making that into a much more inclusive and welcoming place on the left. That was just shared by everyone. So many people we spoke to shared that idea, and that made me feel really hopeful, and that does continue to make me feel hopeful.
Brilliant. So it's a huge win for Forward Momentum. You take the NCG on this platform of democratic participation, of solidarity, and then comes the CLGA slate. So the Centre-Left Grassroots Alliance is a kind of grouping of left organisations, and it's putting together a slate of candidates for the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party. So Momentum is part of the alliance. The idea is you agree a set of candidates for the left to vote for, so the left vote doesn't get split, and we can secure a majority on the NEC. What happens next? Because there seemed to be a lot of fallout from that process, and you guys were kind of like right in the thick of it. So from your perspective, what did you learn from that process? What went wrong, and what is there that we need to kind of draw on going forwards?
Yeah, I guess just to start off, we in the election, there's two things that we said about the NEC election that we really promised. One was, a united left slate. There wouldn't be a split like there had been just a few months before, which sort of led to the left, losing. So a united left slate that would win an NEC election, and secondly, that slate would be democratically decided and not sort of in a backroom deal. And that was really important to us. And then what happened, I think, literally the evening that our election ended, so before we even knew the results, the Labour Party sort of announced like a much faster timetable for the election. And I think there was maybe 8 or 9 days before you had to sort of submit the candidates. And so we literally went back and forth for several days. Like, we did consider, could we run primaries in this time? But it just seemed like completely unfeasible. And I think we had 4 or 5 days to sort of have some sort of democratic process in Momentum, which was basically that we opened up applications and then ultimately had the NCG voting. We had 4 or 5 days to decide who we as Momentum would send into these negotiations. And, we picked 5, I think, really amazing candidates who we sort of, took into the negotiations. And then 2 people, and I'm very glad it wasn't me, were sort of in those negotiations for, I think, 3 or 4 evenings in a row and came out of it with a slate, basically. And I think everyone was just relieved that agreement had been reached, because it was sort of so difficult in the past. And I guess also everyone is obviously extremely relieved, extremely happy that after, I don't know, 3 months of a campaign, we sort of saw like such a successful result, like 5 out of 6 candidates, and as well as Ellen Morrison for the disabled rep and Lara McNeil for the youth rep, and also a very good result for the Young Labour elections. So sort of really pleased about the results, but obviously, like getting there wasn't easy. And I think the whole process has just sort of shown that, and I think there's a lot of agreement on this, to be honest, that the CLGA as a body belongs in the past and as in the way that it works at the moment, and that we really clearly need like key reforms to it, that we need these processes to be much more transparent, more democratic, more accountable. If it was up to me personally, I would definitely want to see primaries to sort of select our candidates for the next NEC elections. Like, ideally you'd have a body like the CLGA, maybe even the CLGA sort of, overseeing those primaries, so that all groups in the left feel confident and trust the process, and every member of a left organisation that sort of signs up can like take part, and then you have much more accountable candidates as well, candidates who are accountable to the grassroots, and candidates who have to say what they think, and sort of respond to pressure. And I guess that gets us to, I'm sure, one of the topics that I guess you're alluding to, which was that obviously we sort of saw ourselves embroiled in like a crisis around transphobia, like very early on in our term, because there was sort of criticisms of some candidates, and that was something that we took really seriously. I think we really felt that was extremely important, and really felt how much pain there was out there in the trans community. And we raised concerns around this, like again and again, and where I feel it's okay to say we were quite disappointed that not all of the candidates came out very strongly on this matter, but also we'd agreed to United Slate, and we've wanted to continue backing that slate ultimately. But yeah, I don't know if Sonali wants to add anything.
I just kind of before that, I just kind of wanted to posit. I think that you know, that's a really good response in many ways. But do you think that part of the criticism that I think Momentum came under was agreeing to a united slate before necessarily agreeing to certain key principles that related to principles of solidarity, the NCG members perhaps having signed the trans pledges but for granted? In this climate, we very much cannot do that. So do you think that the NCG hampered itself by agreeing to a united slate before ascertaining that candidates like Laura Pidcock, for example, who, as far as I know, still hasn't clarified her position, do you think that the commitment to united slate before that potentially damages the trust that trans people and allies might place in Momentum, whatever your personal politics?
I think that we were in a position where, ideally, you're right, we went into a negotiation situation essentially already sort of hamstrung because we'd already put forward a pledge about a united slate. It's not a very good position to be in. And really, ideally, we would have had open primaries, and then that would have allowed a very clear understanding about what the political sort of consensus and what the political agreement was amongst candidates before there was any, before we'd even got to sort of like a slate sort of scenario, whereas actually we went into exactly what we didn't want to do in lots of ways, in that we went into a negotiating process where we were junior partners. We had very little say until, well, everything was done through consensus. So Momentum that we were able to go in and our line forward, but ultimately we had to negotiate exactly even down to things like statements of principles and stuff. I completely take what you're saying, Emma. I think that probably has dented like our trust amongst people, and we're very aware of like the level of hurt and level of pain that has caused, and we're very aware of how serious that is as well. We've taken that really seriously, and we know that this is sort of it's like the left, the British left, has to grapple with. We need to get away from this sort of delineation between what's like quote unquote identity issues and wider socialist struggle. We need to just completely overcome that because we have to accept that minorities are being thrown under the bus, and that actually a lot of that is about a lack of understanding. So yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Okay, thanks. I think lots to talk about there, but I think we're gonna have to move on because there's so much to cover. In terms of the NEC, fast forward 3 months on, I'm trying to remember now when the
even 4 months.
Election campaign started. Okay, 4 months, right. It's a very different situation now, it seems, within the Labour Party, even to what it was when Forward Momentum launched, right? So at the big launch Forward Momentum, there's a quote that, there's this sense of urgency and energy that hasn't been felt since, December 2019. And now I think it's fair to say what we're witnessing within the Labour Party seems to be a purge of the left, right? Or an attempt to kind of push the left back to the margins. So we've had members recently suspended for non-compliance with rulings around the suspension of Corbyn, and we've got, I think, new guidance being issued which seems strikingly authoritarian, that implies that any discussion of Corbyn not having the whip given back opens the avenues for potential anti-Semitism and therefore has to be ruled out of order. Given that this is the case, a lot of people are asking themselves, what is the point or the utility of organising within the Labour Party as an organisation now hostile to the left?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've just. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I think you've described the situation really, really well, and it is outrageous, isn't it? And so upsetting, and especially for considering that this time last year we were all out in the rain every single day for 12 hours, and that is just there's like complete disregard for that, and for what like grassroots members have done for this party and are doing for it. And, it's totally understandable that people feel really upset about that. And I think it is also understandable that people are asking themselves, why remain in the party? I guess what I would say is that I think the reasons for why people were in the Labour Party last year are it's the same reasons, in my opinion, in this year from a strategic point of view. Anyway, like if I go back a few years, I sort of am a baby of the 2010 student movement, and I come from the extra parliamentary left, and I would never, I didn't even think about being a member of the Labour Party. That was not really a terrain of struggle for me. But then, I joined to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, and then I think it still took a couple of years, but then I guess I started to, basically understand or see the Labour Party as, a crucial vehicle for achieving change in this country, basically. And I sort of understood that in order to win change, we need a foot inside Parliament and we need a foot outside of it. And we need both. We need to build a social movement, Labour movement that is transformative, and we need a socialist Labour Party in government, really. And they sort of depend on each other. And I think that hasn't changed. And so I think, the Labour Party is a terrain of struggle that we need state power to institute change. And there just isn't another option. There's just no other option for socialists. And I don't think it's another option to try and build a new party. It's just not going to work under the current conditions. And so if we're socialists, and if we believe, as we learned again last year, that there's no shortcut to socialism, then we believe that this isn't a short-term project, and that we're not just going to get short-term successes. I think we've all been spoiled a little bit in the last few years because everything just seemed to to happen. And so I guess we just have to do the grunt work over the next few years or even decades, and hopefully get ourselves in a better position. So I would definitely say people should stay in the Labour Party.
Sonali, do you wanna?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that we remember that, like, Starmer had to stand on a purportedly left platform to get elected. He had to. Why did he have to do that? Because the majority of the membership, as has been borne out from the NEC elections, they had to impose a new voting system upon the NEC elections in order to get one more candidate in from the right wing. I mean, if that had been under force past the post, the left would have swept the board. That shows to us that there's still a really strong section of the membership support the informative agenda that was fostered under Corbyn. And the thing is, there isn't an alternative, as Deb said. The alternative is what is unfolding around us. The alternative is the highest death toll in Europe. The alternative is people not having enough sick pay to be able to stay home, even though they have COVID-19 symptoms. The alternative is kids drowning in the sea. So it's not that, we understand that we have a commitment to these things, and there's not an option about it. So in terms of staying in the party, we have to stay in the party. Otherwise, we are turning our back on those policies. We're giving up those policies, and they're ours. And this is our place to occupy. We cannot give it over to the right wing. But equally, the movement has to exist to move the Labour Party and to push the Labour Party to those positions that we need them to. We can't have one without the other. So I'd never say to anyone, just keep your party membership and that's it, we're done. The struggle is real, as comrades would say. We need to come up on all trains, but it has to be ideas. This is one of the ideas, and we have to make that point really clear. They cannot be jettisoned now.
It's an argument I have some sympathy with. I'm myself kind of very much on the fence about a whole lot of things at the moment. And I suppose the counter argument to that would be, if you look at what's happened, once again with Bernie Sanders in the States as well, for example, the left wing of the party is always saying to itself, there is no alternative. And the impetus, therefore, for the party to move in a significant way left is arguably reduced. The party is swinging back to pandering towards the right wing. And we can see that, through various rollbacks and even through various kind of comms being put out by the party now, and attack lines, which are much more about competency rather than about ideology. If if accepting there is no alternative, you still think that we need to remain within the Labour Party to try and shift it, what strategies are available to Momentum to actually do that would threaten the structure that disadvantages the left and prioritizes the right? And for example, like a third, having another left party, like, I'm not massively hopeful about it, but the argument could be that it would split the vote at least. If there was a constituency, a demographic of leftists who, for the next election, perhaps stayed home, do you think that would have any utility in reminding the Labour leadership that actually you can't take the votes of leftists along with the votes of people of colour, for example, for granted any longer?
I really don't think they would care about that, and the people that would pay the price are like working class people in this country. All the people that like Sonali was just, sort of referring to, because they would be suffering for another 5 years under like a Tory government. But I think, and I wanted to come in a bit before you asked the question when you sort of started to talk about the US, because I think what they understand, and I think we understand that too, is that it's not just about saying there's no alternative and we have to stay, in this sort of with the Democrats, but what they understand and have done a huge amount of work on over the past five or so years is that we have to build our own institutions, and that is how we're strong. And what they've built with the Democratic Socialists of America and various other organizations is just incredible and such an inspiration to us. And we actually currently, as Momentum, sort of trying to learn from them and like meeting people from the DSA because we're really inspired by them. And they, I think, since in the last couple of months, they've had like 20 or 30,000 new members. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but it's a big number, basically. And actually, since Bernie Sanders lost that election, like, they've massively built that institution. And what they've also done is they've got new radical socialists, like young, diverse radical socialists elected into office. And they've also, I guess, in a third way, like build themselves locally, and they're focused on policy. So that what they managed to do at this election is that alongside the overall election, they managed to sort of win a load of like grassroots ballots and referenda around like really, really progressive issues. And so I think the same is basically true for the UK, and that's why we're in Momentum. That's why after last year's election, I was like, fuck, like, it's time to get really involved in Momentum, because Momentum is the institution, in my opinion, that we should be building in order to strengthen the Labour left inside and outside the Labour Party. And I think, I think a strong Momentum with like tens of thousands of members who are like really connected, who are really active, who are really educated and skilled, and working with each other, liaising, whether that's on things like CLP motions or, selections or on campaigns. I think that is a real threat to Keir Starmer. And I think, we are sort of seeing some of that in the last few weeks in terms of the sort of collective response from the grassroots to Jeremy Corbyn's suspension. We saw it last night, like there was 250 members on a Bristol Momentum call after the regional party had suspended their AGM. So yeah, I think all of that stuff is really important. And then in addition, we need we need an ever bigger socialist campaign group of MPs. I think it's really important that there is now double figures, and I think maybe 36-ish MPs in the socialist campaign group. It has to be a key strategic goal between now and 2024 to really increase that number. Get another 10 Zara Sultanas and whatever they're called, because ultimately, if in 2024 we do get a Keir Starmer government, what we need a very, very strong socialist campaign group who will ultimately tip the balance, and no vote will be possible without the left MPs.
There's a lot to unpick there. I want to bring Sonali in. No, it's brilliant. I want to bring Sonali in, but I want to kind of pick up on one of those, and we can go off piece a little bit. Given the need that's been identified to build like alternative left institutions that are connected to grassroots local movements and networks, is there any plan to remove the necessity of being a member of the Labour Party to be a Momentum member? And secondly, with the Socialist Campaign Group, we've seen a few abstentions and towing the line on the basis of wanting to remain on the front bench or wanting to retain some degree of power, which saw some of the SCG MPs abstaining on the Spy Cops bill and supporting the counter-extremism legislation of July this year. So on the one hand, I suppose, don't know why I put these two questions together and I think about it. Are there any plans to change the criteria for membership of Momentum so that the Labour Party doesn't have to be one of the boxes to check? And secondly, what needs to be done to make the SCG MPs more accountable to wider left networks? Sonali, maybe you want to kick off with that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, on the membership structures, what we really need to do is like extend and broaden Momentum membership, and that has to be our ultimate sort of goal. At the moment, we're very much sort of like also trying to say to people, like, don't, as we've said, like, don't leave the Labour Party, because we need to have socialists in the Labour Party. So strategically right now, it's a consideration that's ongoing, basically, because those things are both really important to consider together. Because we need leftists to stay at the moment for a lot of reasons that Deb's outlined there. In terms of the SCG, so partly also we're strengthening Momentum's relationship with the SCG as well, which I think is really important. And yeah, I share your frustration about those abstentions that have happened this year. Have been really sort of devastating. We've also seen people like Dan Carden absolutely step up and speak for so many of us, for instance, on the Spy Cops bill. And of course, Momentum had quite a strident intervention into that as well. And that's really important that we continue to do that. But I think we can't talk about Parliament, like when we talk about elected representatives who we do have to hold to account, but it's harder when we talk about a parliamentary level. But we need to start fostering those processes from the very bottom, from the very start. I shouldn't say bottom, sorry, from every level. So, for instance, when we're talking about council, we need to start thinking about socialist councillors as people who are fully embedded within their local left and within their local communities, and to be absolutely wedded to socialist policies and to campaigns locally. And so there's a level of accountability between local groups and councillors. I really think that system needs to start being considered as we get into Parliament as well. But I think it is hard. It is hard. You know, I'll be honest with you, because it's about, you know, those MPs have, sort of like there's sort of like a lot of discussion even within the SCG at the moment themselves, that Momentum we can have a seat at the table. But actually there's a lot being worked out there that Momentum can't really intervene on.
Yeah, well, it looks like there'll be some interesting updates to follow with regards to that relationship. So you mentioned Labour councils and socialist councillors. This kind of ties in, I guess, to the broader strategy that Forward Momentum ran on of refounding Momentum. In that vein, what is the strategy to try and empower local Momentum groups and empower local campaigns for socialist councillors? And how is Momentum going to try and facilitate linking those to extra parliamentary organising? Is that a strategy that's being worked out? Are there some ideas that you're going off? Is there a timetable? What's the deal?
Yeah. You go. No, you go.
So we sort of like, so this is some of the work that's really been happening under the radar. So it's really great to get an opportunity to talk about it a bit more. We found in Momentum as obviously one of the key planks of our sort of like platform when we stood for the NCG, and how we sort of view it. Sounds a little bit culty, I know, but we sort of like viewed that as, when we talk about a reorientation towards a membership, we wanted that to be about empowering members, about giving members more say in the organisation at a national level, in the sort of like level of communication and the sort of relationship between NCG regional reps and local groups, and basically ultimately to turn that whole sort of like legion and network of activists who came into the party under Corbyn into organisers. People who've been out in the rain and the freezing cold, you know, and learning how to run boards, like, you know, training those people with all that sort of capacity and knowledge and probably a lot of experience of themselves of organising and campaigning, but turning them into like, you know, self-confident organisers in their local, in their neighbourhood. And so we started to sort of, and it became obvious that should start with the local groups, although that local momentum groups are in various states of sort of like vibrancy to sort of like less vibrancy, like depending on like the level of like coherence locally. But it was an obvious way to sort of find a structure to start to create a national structure. So each regional rep has got a sort of like adopted a handful of local groups in order to start talking about, you know, about building up local groups, about offering training, offering more support, sort of unveiling the eviction resistance campaign, which is a national campaign, but sort of starting to think about how that would translate for local groups in their area. We've got over 30 housing action groups that have sprung up around that, who are going to be, who have been trained or will be trained in resisting evictions. And also for local groups in this sort of next month or two to start to put together a 12-month plan for their area. And that's about the democratic process for what they see local campaign priorities to be, how to sort of embed local groups in sort of local left councillor selections to make sure that candidates have a connection with the local groups, and also to have a greater say in what we're doing nationally as well, so specifically around sort of like Labour Party conference, about what left intervention should be around Labour conference. So that's sort of ongoing, and hopefully there'll be more of a bigger like fanfare around that in the new year. But this is all sort of the work that's been going on under the radar, that's taking some time to put into place, and it will take a bit of time to put into place, but hopefully it's starting to come to sort of fruition now.
Cool. Cool. And I suppose I can see, because one of the questions that someone submitted to me before this started actually was, isn't there a danger that momentum is becoming institutionalized? It's facing, on the one hand, like the kind of apathy and exhaustion and the trauma of the Corbyn defeat, or on the other hand, redirecting energies to extra parliamentary organising. So it sounds like that seems like a coherent strategy for trying to bring the two together, which sounds really promising. And I suppose.
Can I just say something on that?
Go on. Yes. Yeah.
No, I'll let you finish. Sorry.
No, come in. I've forgotten the sentence now.
What I would just say on that, you know, what I think we recognise basically, and respectfully, I'll say previous leaderships of this organisation maybe didn't quite recognise that or didn't see it as important, is that momentum is nothing without an active membership, and it cannot successfully organise inside the Labour Party in the long term without an active membership, and it cannot do anything, you know, in communities without an active membership. And so, you know, one of the things the way we organise the momentum is we have loads of like different, on the NCG we have lots of different working groups that we sort of, you know, all formed newly once we got elected. Like I get to chair the procedures working group, which is very sexy, but also the membership working group. And that, you know, we have been putting loads of work into that. And, you know, what the point of that group is to really, really, I guess, create lots of different opportunities for members to be involved in momentum. And I guess seeing that as a process, you know, we can't just turn it into a membership organisation or into a member-led organisation from one day to another. But it's something that I think will sort of evolve over time. And these, you know, and I think we sort of think that the most important, I guess, of us, the most important starting point were local momentum groups, because the organisation once upon a time had 150 local groups. I can't vouch for, you know, what those groups did. It is just a number, but there were 150 momentum groups. I'm not saying that we will get to 150 groups, and if any staff are watching this, they could probably they'll be rolling their eyes right now. But we are sort of have set ourselves as a target is to definitely have 30 really active, thriving groups by March, and then to extend that number. And it's really exciting because people are actually starting to come to us now and saying we want to set up a new group. And what we've been doing is we've been having like meetings of NCG members sort of going to local groups across the country and trying, I guess redeveloping also what is the purpose of these groups basically. And I just, we as the NCG cannot do anything if we don't have like a thriving political culture in the organisation of organising, discussion, etc. on the local level.
I'm glad you interjected. Really well put. Yeah, because another question submitted actually was, what alongside kind of organisational strategy, what are the priority constituencies and networks that local groups should be embedding themselves within and working with, and how can Momentum at a national level facilitate that? Personally, like I think about that specifically in relation to unions like my union, the Bakers Union, talking about disaffiliation from the Labour Party. What does it mean to try and cultivate a relationship with a union in the process of potentially leaving the Labour Party at a local level?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and obviously that's up to the Bakers Union about sort of affiliation or not. But certainly something we recognise is how important rank and file trade unionists are. How many members are rank and file trade unionists? And one of the things we actually are developing is a Momentum sort of trade unionist rank and file network that would allow sort of left trade unionists to coordinate and work on a national level. And we're really excited about that because we can sort of see, we've seen this year how important workplace organising is. We've seen sort of a mass increase in trade union membership, tens and thousands of people with trade unions since COVID hit, which is fantastic to see and really important. And we think that Momentum can offer a great deal of support in order to actually just bare bones, like just connecting people and allowing people to connect up, to share, because shared struggle is going to be so important. And we've also seen that increasingly, like through, for instance, I don't know, like things like cleaners at universities being in-house through say IWGB, and sort of like seeing like UCU comrades coming out in solidarity. Like we need to have as much of an eye on as possible on sort of a greater sort of coalition building and a greater sense of solidarity, and so much of that will be through TU organising.
Absolutely, as a trade unionist, absolutely. And speak on the point of solidarity, in terms of minorities, and in terms of minorities in regard to Labour Party policy. So I'm thinking about the kind of ambivalence towards trans rights that have been exhibited by the Labour Party, as well as sections of Momentum, sections of the left. And we've also got a question that's asked about whether or not it's likely that the Labour Party will row back from its liberative approach towards disability rights, and whether it's going to row back away from a social mode of disability. At the same time as well, rowing back on commitments to fighting racism basically racism that isn't anti-Semitism in many ways. We had the Islamophobia report that was brought out that got virtually no coverage. So what is the role of Momentum in ensuring that the Labour Party doesn't roll back on these policies in particular?
So specifically on that question, thanks for that in the viewer, one of the viewers. We were like really proud and really pleased to be able to support Ellen Morrison's candidacy as first disabled rep for the NEC, and obviously it's amazing to see a socialist woman elected as the first disabilities rep to the NEC. So we were like really proud to endorse her candidacy, and we will be working really closely with her on that within the Labour Party, and I think that's really important. I think that in terms of some of the other issues you talked about, we need to, I mean, some of this will be happening through the refounding process and through local groups. We're talking a lot around creating like an independent left organising space for black and brown socialists, which doesn't really exist in the country at the moment on a national level, and what that would look like. I'm really inspired by the DSA and their Afro-Socialist network, and have been talking to them a lot about how that was fostered. It was fostered quite organically, actually. A lot of it is about carving out that space that we know is increasingly needed, because things are becoming really scary and dangerous, let's face it. But I think that's also an issue around political education. And I'll hand over to Debs, actually, because she might want to speak a bit more about this. But part of this is, like, we've become really, definitely, as I alluded to before, like, it's become really clear, and I think that a lot of us sort of stood on this platform, as you mentioned, of like intersectional socialism. But it's really important that we get away from this sort of idea that there's some sort of identity politics and socialist politics. Like, there isn't. Like, these struggles are absolutely part and parcel of the socialist struggle, and we need to recognise that. And in Momentum, we have a responsibility to make sure that space is available for all socialists. But Deb might want to talk a bit about the political education.
Yeah, I had a few things I wanted to say, and then you just said it in terms of that intersectional class socialism. And I think we have such a responsibility with Momentum as a sort of on the Labour left as well, to sort of put forward that politics. And I think what I'm really proud of also with the NCG is that it is really, really diverse, and we have people from all sorts of backgrounds. But we actually don't have, which I think is a crying shame, is we don't have a trans member of the NCG, and I hope we can sort of rectify that in like future elections. But I think it is really about I guess fighting on every level. Whether that's like writing articles, which we are doing, like as NCG members, whether it's NEC members sort of putting up the fight, as like Sonali was alluding to, members passing motions on a local level, and ultimately. We all know that the real pressure will not come from any of those things, but will come from like movements in the street. What like Black Lives Matter was able to do this summer in terms of how it was able to, put pressure on like Labour politicians and sort of shift the narrative and shift the narrative of what was seen as possible. I think that is ultimately, where we can achieve the most. But what I will say about political education, as someone who spent the last 5 years basically building the world transformed, I obviously think political education is absolutely crucial. And I think, I always think we have to start from a place where we think that people can change their minds, and people can learn, and people can develop their understandings. And we are all from different backgrounds, and we all have had different experiences, and political education helps us to basically understand each other and to understand what other people experience. And that's why, like, I think it's so important, and it is particularly important on liberation issues, I think. And as Momentum, we're still working out like what is our role in regards to political education. Like, we're currently, we're currently sort of thinking about plans of like next year rolling out a sort of, on a small scale, but rolling out a sort of leadership development program for like active local Momentum activists across the country, which will just sort of be a first. It'll be quite an intense program, and which only a small number of people could attend. But as well as that, what we really want to do is sort of run like programs on a national level on like key issues. And the first one that we've done and that we're currently in the middle of is a political education program on trans liberation, which we really cannot take the credit for. There is a group of amazing trans activists, like partly led by some TWT organisers, as well as others across the country, who've sort of come together, and they've run 2 events supported by Momentum, and there's going to be another 2, and hopefully that will sort of be rolled out into trainings across the country. And I guess really trying to push that issue sort of at the front and centre. And if you haven't, you should check out the event that happened a couple of weeks ago. It was amazing. You can find it on the TWT
I tuned in.
YouTube.
It was fantastic. Yeah.
It was, wasn't it?
Maybe our invisible coordinator, Charlotte, can put a link on socials for that, actually, because it was really brilliant. I don't want to dwell on that for too long, because we're coming to the end and there's a few more questions. But quickly, do you envisage that after that political education seminar, we will see a clarifying statement from the Laura Pidcocks of the movement?
I mean, we cannot. Yeah, I don't think Sonali and me can speak for Laura Pidcock, unfortunately.
Okay.
I just don't think that's in our power. I think if people have questions, they should write to her and they should ask her. And I hope she will, but we cannot speak for her.
All right, we're coming towards the end of the hour, and I have 3 questions that I wanted to ask before that kind of happens. So the first is, as in my capacity as an editor of Red Pepper, there was a piece by, I think, Will Watkins in New Socialist a few months ago that posited the idea of a Momentum media fund that would, fund left media and kind of from a democratic perspective with membership input. When can I expect my money, Deborah? When am I getting it? Is that something that you've been talking about? Because the development of left media, is a big topic.
Actually, in the many working groups that I am in, it is actually something that we have spoken about. And Leo, if he's watching this, will hopefully be happy to know that his article did actually have quite an impact, and a lot of us did read it. So do please write articles to put out ideas and to pressure us to do stuff. I think Momentum is not in the financial position to right now basically have implement a media fund for it of any sort of scale, and so that isn't happening at the moment. But at some point next year, like timings need to be sort of still decided. We are going to sort of have like what we call a second part of the refounding process. So basically the ability for members to have a say on how Momentum should change in the long term, in terms of how in terms of making changes to its constitution and our long-term strategy. And what I would like to see, very much talking, I guess, it's not definite, but what I would like to see is a sort of proposal for a media fund to be, debated and discussed and hopefully decided on there. I think basically there are some interesting and exciting proposals of how that could work, but it definitely still needs a bit of thought and a bit of discussion.
Yeah.
So maybe this time next year you can expect your money.
I'll be waiting on that check, babe. I'll be waiting on that check. We're reaching the end of the session, but there's two slightly more bait questions that we're going to go with. So, what are you guys most proud of having achieved since joining the NCG? Maybe Sonali, you want to kick off with that one?
I think what's been really sort of made an impact in which people have been, I felt like we've had like really sort of great success, I shouldn't say success, but it feels like there's been like a great development through speaking to local groups and reconnecting with members. And that's sort of been like, as I say, a lot of it's been under the radar. A lot of it is just like endless meetings and phone calls and Zoom calls and everything. But it's actually that like properly like speaking to members about what the grassroots are thinking, what they're up to, including sense of sometimes great sense of irritation or and disgruntlement, but it's still really importantly about reconnecting sort of like national momentum with sort of like grassroots organisers. And I think it's ongoing, and as I say, it's like it should be ongoing and it should continue to be, but I think that's where the really important work is happening, and I can sort of see that's sort of the only way. It's sort of the only way, I think, to continue to sort of build left hegemony, to continue to sort of remind people that the ideas are there, we have the ideas, and to make people feel more self-confident and to make people feel more connected for all of us, really.
Thanks. Deborah?
Me as well? Yeah, that is such an interesting question. I don't have the perfect answer to it, but it sort of reminded me of something that someone said to me last week, which is they said, can you remember another left organization where there's been such a smooth transition of power from one political leadership to another who actually have really or at least in the face of it, quite fundamental differences? And I'm sure there has been one, but that's something that I'm quite proud of. That basically, I do think, we came in quite a we want to change like all these things, and I think we have already managed to do a lot of that stuff, even if, you know, a lot of the projects that we've started, they're very much unfinished. But I think I think you can see, or you will be able to see soon, like a shift to the left, a shift to sort of more like campaigning, more like membership, member-led organization. And I think that's something I'm really proud of. And I have to say, I am genuinely, and I know it's up here, I'm really proud of all the like NCG members. You know, so many of us are that, you know, we're just like local activists, really. Grassroots activists who'd never been in you know, the leadership of a national organization like Momentum, but which is exactly the sort of people you would want, in my opinion, in the leadership of Momentum. And everyone has been working their socks off and is so committed and cares so much, and, you know, really wants to sort of implement the agenda that we stood on, and you know, serve serve in a sort of good way. So and then finally, maybe doesn't get enough credit, but I am very proud of the Young Labour election results, which I sort of was a bit involved with. Like, I think they absolutely smashed it. You know, Jess got more than half of the votes for chair, and, you know, Young Labour is the one national, you know, the one socialist institution on a national level in the Labour Party now, and I'm sure Keir Starmer is not happy about it.
Yeah, I'm sure he's also not happy about what I'm most proud of, which is some very good Momentum comms that dropped today, which was basically a meme generator. I encourage everyone watching to check out Momentum Twitter. Whoever's doing comms has upped their game, and it's good to see. Final question. It's 2024. It's another general election. Sir Keir Starmer QC is leading the cause. Are Momentum going to be leading activists out in the wind and the rain to knock on doorsteps again?
So this is this is where I think we really do need to have a look. We talked a bit about the DSA, and we need to sort of really look at where the real sort of success stories around America are not just about. I mean, Biden squeaked to win because of grassroots organisers, working class organisers, predominantly people, and the success stories there were, you know, I think 26 out of 30 socialist candidates who were selected by the DSA getting elected to the House, about those sort of those policies that Deb's mentioned at a local and state level, socialist policies getting passed. So that is where, you know, that is where Momentum should be and could be putting our efforts. It's about building up that sort of socialist caucus at every level, councillor level, at an MP level, making sure that we have people who are committed to sort of transformative socialism, continuing to push those policies forward. And, you know, that's what we can and should be doing. And I can see, well, I mean, you know, we would really like to be working with the leadership on this. We would like there to be an acknowledgement that the policy agenda has enormous support. We'd really like to see greater respect being shown to members, definitely. We'd like to see socialists in the shadow cabinet, and to get out of this sort of like hole that we're being dug into at the moment, like unnecessary and self-indulgent factional sort of like warfare, and actually get to a position where Labour can beat the Tories. But we don't think that can happen unless all of those things happen. We will not beat the Tories if we don't go into 2024 with a transformative agenda. You cannot overcome hard right populism with do-nothing centrism.
What I would just say really short is, yes, we'll be out on the doorstep 100%, but also 100% more selectively and more strategically than we would have been this time a year ago. Like, you know, I think we will need a strategy to focus our efforts on electing socialist MPs and increasing the size of the socialist campaign group, and, you know, not just like door knocking for anyone and everyone, basically. So I think, that would be important in 2024, but obviously it's a long time away. So we'll see what happens between now and then.
Well, it sounds like in between now and then, you've got plenty to be getting on with anyway. I'm really hopeful, cautiously hopeful to see the institutions and networks develop. thank you, Sonali and Deborah, so much for joining Red Pepper tonight, and thank you to everyone who's been watching, listening, everyone who's contributed. Check out Red Pepper and Momentum socials for information on how to join your local Momentum group, or if you're interested in founding one to be part of the networks and or community organising that Sonali and Deborah have been talking about. If you've got any thoughts, any feedback, if you want to generate discourse, feel free to @ me and drag me on Twitter, and feel free to engage with Red Pepper, write to us, and participate in the new, hopefully, democratic routes that are going to be instituted to enable Momentum to grow into the vision that Deborah and Sonali both got their seats at the NCG on. I think we'll leave it there because my mom is frantically texting me saying it's dinner time. 26 lads. Thank you so much. Fish and chips.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, it's been really good. It's been really good. Yeah, thanks everyone. Look after yourselves, and yeah, see you again hopefully. Love and solidarity, lads.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Solidarity.
Solidarity. Bye.